Have you ever looked at all of the weapons in the finals and wondered, how exactly am I supposed to use all of these? Or maybe you got killed by that double barrel player one too many times and you need to know how you should counter it. Well, you've come to the right place, as in this video, I'll be explaining both how to use and how to counter every light weapon in the finals. And because this video is quite long, there's timestamps for every weapon, so you can find whichever one you like. Alright, let's get started. So we're going to test things out with the sniper rifle first. The sniper rifle is pretty much the definition of a poke weapon. And so with a weapon like this, you obviously want to take cover pretty much constantly, whether that be high ground or something that's like a little bit of a head glitch like this, and use this to get big chunks of damage on your opponents before ducking back into cover once again. It's a pretty simple gameplay loop, but there are some nuances to the sniper rifle that make it a little bit harder to use than some of you might realize. So the first thing to show off is that it does have bullet drop and travel time after a certain range. If the target is close enough, it'll just be hit scan, but yeah, if it's too far away, the bullet does have a little bit of travel time, which makes it a little bit harder to hit moving targets from far range. Some people kind of like to run around and do MLG trick shots and stuff with this weapon. So if you want to be one of those players, you have to keep in mind that this sniper rifle does not just immediately become accurate the second you hit the scope. You have to let it sit there for a second. So if I try to just tap my scope and fire, like, it kind of works sometimes, but as you can see, there's still a little bit of spread right now, and I'm missing my target. So you have to let the scope go in just a little bit, kind of like this. And that should be the perfect quick scope amount that you need. So yeah, don't just tap the reticle and hope that that is enough for you to actually be accurate. You need to actually scope in just a little bit with it first. Now, while you're playing sniper, you're going to run into those situations where someone does end up pushing you and you have to choose to either try and run away or figure out if you want to fight. I personally wouldn't really fight people unless you've already damaged them or you have teammates around who can help you out. I would just kind of run away at this point because a sniper is really not meant to be a super close range weapon. Or maybe you're super confident in your abilities, in which case maybe. Now, if you do end up getting in those close range situations, one shot in a melee will kill a light. And then one headshot and a melee will kill a medium. And then for the heavy, you're going to need one headshot and one body shot. Don't try to do melee combos on the heavies, it just doesn't work. And for the light, all you need is one headshot to kill. And then for the medium, you can do 2 body shots and a melee. Or you can do 1 headshot and 1 body shot. Now, the sniper rifle can be very, very annoying to fight, but it is pretty easily countered. If you have any amount of healing on your team, whether that be a healing emitter, whether that be heal beam, whether that be the H+ infuser, you can kind of out-heal the poke damage that the sniper does. That way, the sniper is not going to be getting nearly as much value as it normally would. Sniper players tend to basically do enough damage to allow their other teammates to push in, but if you're already healed up by the time that they get there, then the sniper is pretty much useless, and any other weapon would be better in that scenario. Also, forcing the sniper to fight you in close range or in a sustained battle that you know you can win is also a really good idea. And in terms of gadgets, if you catch them in a gravity vortex, they're kind of useless. If you end up fighting a sniper while you have dash on, you can make it really hard for them to hit you. Then obviously jump pad and zipline are great for simply just getting on top of the high ground that the sniper's probably camping on and forcing a close range engagement. And then heavy, you have a couple choices. You can make cover out of your goo gun. You could put a mesh shield for your teammates and they can fire back at the sniper. Or you can even grab something like the barricade or the goo grenade to create cover so that the sniper just simply can't hit you at all. Additionally, using weapons like the pike or the repeater on the medium can challenge a sniper pretty easily and often win. So while sniper rifle might seem hard to counter for some of you newer players out there, especially some of you who might be power shift players, the sniper rifle is pretty easy to counter if you do know what you're doing. It just requires you to use more specific strategies than you might otherwise use. Now, the 9.3R is a fantastic weapon these days. It's pretty good at close range with its amazing hip fire. It's even pretty good at the mid range as well. And it's even good at long range because it actually keeps a lot of its damage. So you can use the 9.3R in a very wide variety of situations. Now, the 9.3R is definitely what you should consider a sustain weapon. You have to stay in the fight to actually kill people. You can't really just burst them down super quickly, but it does have a little bit of that poke power with the burst nature of the gun. Obviously not as much as something like the repeater on medium might have, or something like the sniper rifle that we just talked about, but it does have a little bit of that poke identity to it, but it's mainly a sustained weapon. Now, because of that, getting your enemy to fight you in a bit of a sustained battle is usually a good idea. Because you're a light, you can't really just go out there without cover or anything like that, so I would still advise you to stay somewhat around cover to retreat if you need to, but you do kind of want to force those one-on-one engagements with this weapon if possible. Now, the great thing about the 9-3R is that once you've done a little bit of damage with it, like this, you can dash in there and take advantage of its insane hip fire. And some of you might be wondering, well, why would I ever use the hip fire? That's because your strafe speed goes way up when you're using hip fire compared to if you're aiming down sight. So you're going to be a harder target to hit. So when close range with the 9-3R like this, just try to take advantage of that awesome hip fire as often as possible. Now, obviously, tracking is still very important with this weapon, even though it's a burst weapon. But because it's a burst weapon, you can kind of be a little bit more reliant on flicks than you normally would with something like some automatic weapons. But even still, I would advise you practice tracking your target with this weapon than just flicking to them constantly. Now, the way to counter the 9-3R is honestly pretty simple. Most of the time, you just have to win your 1v1s. It's not an insanely overpowered gun by any means. But if you want specific counters with this weapon, usually getting an all-in with a very burst-heavy weapon, maybe something like double barrel or SA-12 will usually kind of be the death of this thing. Or maybe if you happen to get a nice headshot with a sniper rifle on a 9-3R user, that can take them out of the fight pretty quickly. Basically, if they play too much poke like this and they just stay back forever, try to punish them with a similar poke playstyle. Or if you feel like you can easily all-in them, grabbing something like the double barrel can make pretty short work of them before they force you into one of those sustained engagements. Next up, we have the ARN, and the ARN is a very, very range-reliant weapon. As you can see, this gun does not do an incredible amount of damage at close range. It's actually really low compared to a lot of weapons in the game. But the thing about this gun is that it keeps so much of its damage at long range, so you basically want to be playing mid to long range with this weapon at all times. Basically, think about this thing like it's an automatic LH1. So if I want to engage this medium over here, I can kill them pretty consistently as long as I have constant sight on them. Now, this weapon does have an interesting feature where if you fully empty your entire magazine, you get a very fast reload, so it has a lot of that sustained energy with it, but you still kind of have to use it like a poke weapon a little bit. But the thing is, even if you use almost all of its ammo, but manually reload it, it's going to do the slow reload animation instead. So if you want to save that fast reload animation for later, just reload when you have 1 or maybe 2 bullets left. But otherwise, if you want that fast reload animation, you're going to have to completely empty the entire magazine. And if you're on the second fast magazine, you can press reload again to get rid of it and go back to your normal magazine if you ever feel like it. This thing does have very aggressive recoil. I'll show you right here. It is extremely aggressive, but it is also pretty linear. All you have to do is just pull a little to the right and pull a little to the left, but you do have to kind of be constantly moving your mouse or your controller down if you're firing this weapon. So just constantly be moving this down, and then you should be getting good results out of this weapon. By far, the biggest issue I see people having with this gun is having bad recoil control with it. Now, to defeat this weapon, it's really actually pretty simple. This weapon wants to engage you at a very long range, and it wants to keep you in a sustained engagement at that long range for as long as possible. So finding places where you can move in and out of cover without getting shot by this weapon for too long are great until you can approach it and then force a close range sustained engagement with it, or you can use a dive at close range. Basically, just move through cover until you can find a place to get close to this weapon and then just jump on top of the guy, and there's usually not much you can do about it. This also makes Mesh Shield on Heavy a great option for approach, and maybe even something like Winch Claw. Once you get in range of them, you can basically pretty much guarantee a kill if you have something like a Shack or an SA-12 at close range versus an ARN Light. There's just really nothing they can do about it. Now, the M26 Matter is a really interesting weapon because it's not really either sustain, poke, or all-in. It's kind of all of them, because you can play back and do a little bit of a poke play style and then push in for a dive once they get low enough health. But if you feel really confident, you can also just dive them straight away and kill them pretty fast. If it's something like a heavy, you can just keep dashing around them until they end up dying. But that is a little bit more risky than doing something like the poke strategy or just kind of all-inning them with your team. So while you can do all of these playstyles, I recommend that you kind of switch between all of them depending on what the situation is, rather than just relying on one for every single one of your games. Some combos that you should probably know with the M26 Matter are its melee combos. You can get one shot in a melee to kill a light. And then for a medium, it's going to be 2 shots in a melee. And then for heavy, it's just going to be 3 shots. But if you manage to miss a couple pellets in there at some point, then throwing in a quick melee is usually enough to kill them. Now, I'm going to be honest, you're probably not going to get too many situations where these quick melee combos are going to be helpful, but there is definitely one, and that is if someone is stealing a cash out. While this weapon can do really great damage, it does have that little bit of downtime in between shots that someone might be able to get healed during, or maybe it's just not enough to get the DPS you need. So let's say if this light is stealing a cash out and I do this, it is much faster than just shooting him twice, and that could be just the time that you need to stop that steal. Now, to counter this weapon, you just want to try and get as much range on the M26 Matter user as you can. You do not want to fight this guy in close range. And if you do fight them in close range using something like glitched mines or maybe glitched grenades to take out a dash that they are probably using is going to be pretty valuable for you, so that way they can't just keep shooting and keep dashing around you. M26 Matter sustain usually relies on dash and in some situations cloak. Otherwise, its sustain power isn't super great. Now we're up to Dagger, and there is basically only one specialization I would use with Dagger, and that is dash. You can use grapple and you can use cloak if you want to be funny, but once you start getting into the higher ranks of the game, dash is the only one that is viable, and I actually mean that. Grapple specifically is probably fine if you're just playing World Tour or something like that, or maybe up to gold in ranked, but if you want to go to platinum and higher in ranked, I would definitely recommend that you use dash. Now, the nice thing about the Dagger is that the backstab does one-shot pretty much every single class except for the heavy, but that can be solved on the heavy by just throwing a quick melee at the very end. As a Dagger user, you basically never want to be taking people head-on, especially if they are in groups of 2 or 3, unless you have other teammates present, or if you feel like you can very easily secure a kill with one specific tech, and that is the front stab. Basically, what you want to do is you want to charge up your Dagger like this, and then you're going to dash behind them, do a 180 spin, and release your backstab. So just like this. Now, you have to be very specific with the timing, because if you do it too early, you'll just end up hitting their front like that. You'll just end up hitting this area, and that's no good. You'll probably die that way. Or if you do it too late, this is what happens. You just completely miss. So that's why the Dagger is a little bit of a harder weapon to use than some of the other ones in the game, because the Dagger is pretty reliant on this tech at high level, and the window for it is very, very tight. So something that I would recommend you do for the Dagger to actually try and avoid situations where you accidentally end up hitting the front of the person instead of the back is going into your settings, going right here in general on gameplay, and turning off melee aim assist. Now, normally melee aim assist is a good thing, but not with Dagger, because sometimes it'll magnetize to the front of the target a little too early, and that'll be causing you to hit more people from the front rather than the back. So I would turn that off personally. Now, otherwise, if you want to get into left click combos, you can do 1, 2 melee on a light, and then if you want to go to the medium, it is 1, 2, 3, 4 melee. And then if you go over here to the heavy, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as you can see with everybody, I really wouldn't advise going for the left click combos, especially on targets like the medium or the heavy. So you really, really want to get good at making sure that you hit those backstabs, especially if you plan on learning this tech. Now, countering the Dagger is pretty simple. You just want to make sure that you never get backstabbed. So things like motion sensor are great for this, to make sure that you always get pinged when the enemy Dagger player gets near you. Otherwise, something like thermal vision can also be really good if they end up running Vanish Bomb to try and get close to you. But another thing that you can try to do is to predict the front stab timing. So obviously when a person goes for this right there, what you can try to do, let's say that this red dummy right here is a knife player and they come at me, I can swing my character model over to the right like this and force them to get a front hit on me rather than a back hit on me. So if you can accurately predict the timing of when a Dagger user is going to go in for the stab on you, you can pretty much make them useless. And yes, this even does work on high-level players. I've used this against Ruby Dagger players, and every single time they blamed it on a server issue. And in reality, I was just predicting their backstabbings and swinging my character model accordingly. Next up is the M11. The M11 is a very burst-heavy, sustain, and all-in weapon. You want to be super close range with this weapon. You do not want to be far range with this because it does pretty much no damage at long range. It's really, really bad. And the recoil can be a little bit hard for a lot of players to control. So just basically always take these close range engagements, and even these mid-range engagements can be kind of 50-50 because a lot of these mid-range weapons will out damage you. So basically just try and get in these close range engagements. When you're in these close range engagements, you can use the ADS if they're kind of standing still, especially against minigun users, because you can usually just kind of DPS them down. But another thing I would recommend for you to try is using the hip fire on the M11 because it is so strong. Just look at this. Yeah, that's hip fire. It's pretty good. It's good. So try hip firing with the M11. And while you hip fire with this gun, I want you to practice strafing around your target and going behind them. Force them into close range engagements, like this distance from them. Strafe behind them like that. Usually, a lot of players get really, really confused in these situations and just can't track you for whatever reason. Probably because you're hip firing and strafing behind them as a light, which is just a lot faster than what a lot of other classes can do. So always be trying to strafe around with the M11, forcing those close range engagements and strafing behind your opponent to force them to try and track you or just disengage entirely, in which case you are just getting free damage on them. Now, countering the M11 is also pretty simple. You just have to go in those mid-range to long ranges. Most mid-range weapons are just going to absolutely annihilate an M11, and at long ranges, an M11 user is basically a free kill if they try fighting you. So force those mid to long range engagements against the M11 players. Otherwise, you can try doing a bit of a poke playstyle because the M11 wants to do a hard close range engage on you, and forcing them into a poke environment is not making full use of their weapon. And then if you run winch on heavy, you can actually usually just lock them in place to keep them from strafing behind you. In that same line of thinking, if you manage to goo lock them, that can also be pretty effective. Now, most of you probably know that the LH1 is a more long-ranged weapon. It's a semi-auto, and you want to be going for headshots constantly with this thing because otherwise the time to kill is way worse. So I'll show you the body shot time to kill on the heavy here versus the headshot time to kill. There is such a difference right there. So just always be going for those headshots whenever possible, rather than just spamming body shots unless you think that is your only option. Now, another big issue that players have with the LH1 is it's got a lot of recoil. So when they try and go for headshots like this, they end up just kind of letting their recoil take them into the ceiling like that. So you want to be very, very mindful of your recoil control. And if you can't handle the recoil, I would just advise pacing your shots just a little bit so that way the gun can fully reset. This is me firing while I pace my shots. It's still a pretty fast time to kill. You'll notice it's still faster than doing the body shots. So I would rather that you go for headshots and pace your shots if you can't do the recoil control than trying to control your recoil and only going for the body, because hitting the head is still optimal. Now, close range, this gun is not good at all. So obviously the counter to this weapon is to get it into those close range engagements where it's not going to be doing very well. Additionally, while this thing can do well against lights and maybe even sniper players, things like the pike and the repeater can pretty confidently challenge an LH1 user. So if you need to run a poke playstyle, running the repeater or running the pike are all pretty good against the LH1. Now, if you are a bow player, you want to be playing a very, very heavy poke playstyle. And the reason is pretty simple. It's a high damage weapon, but you've got to charge it up every single time. So while you can play around like this in sort of close range because the hip fire on this weapon is actually amazing, you got to make sure that you're playing around cover. Think of this thing as the close range version of the sniper. Because it's kind of the close range version of the sniper, I would highly recommend that you use dash with it. Using cloak with it is actually horrible. I'll show you right here. If I want to draw my arrow, I uncloak. And I have absolutely no mobility if I get caught out. And if I use dash, I'm forcing people into those mid to long range engagements, which aren't necessarily as optimal for me. At that point, you might as well just be using a sniper. So mid to close range is kind of what you're looking for with the bow rather than mid to long range. Now with the bow, you should pretty much always be doing hip fire unless you have a different scope sensitivity, because there's actually no difference in accuracy between hip fire and ADS on the bow. No matter what you use, it's always going to be the exact same. Now, you should also notice here that the bow does have travel time, so you will have to lead your shots a little bit. But even though that's the case, I would still recommend that you aim for the head. Now, take a look at this. I'm probably going to miss this shot right here, right? Nope. I still hit. because the headshot radius around the bow is really, really wide. And even the body shot radius is also really, really forgiving. So even though this weapon is a projectile weapon, it's not super hard to hit your shots on it. So because of that, even though it's a projectile weapon, always try to go for those headshots. Now, some of you might be wondering what the time to kill looks like on the bow. It's just one fully drawn headshot for the light. Otherwise, you can do one body shot in a melee. And for the medium, one fully drawn shot, and then you can just tap some arrows onto him. Or you can do one fully drawn shot and like a half charged arrow on him. And for the heavy, I would highly recommend you get one and then two headshots. And I should mention that you can actually get a nice little tap arrow kill with the bow after you hit a headshot, but the second shot also has to be a headshot as well. And with the little tap shots, it is just a little bit harder than with a fully drawn shot. Now, the biggest counter to a bow user is just to like basically jump on top of them, because once you're in super close range, that makes it so that they're a lot more likely to hit a body shot on you. And they're usually going to lose that time to kill battle. But if you give them those positions where they can just keep poking you down constantly, they're going to be the ones who are going to win. So you need to just jump right on top of the bow user. They have to be constantly playing around a mid to close range, but they don't want to fully commit to a close range. So make them fully commit to that close range and make them fight on your terms. Other than that, if you can force a bow user out into a sustained battle, you can pretty easily win as well if you have an automatic weapon, as long as they aren't dashing around. And if you're having trouble with a dash, using a glitch grenade or using a glitch mine or a winch claw are usually great ways to stop them from doing that. Specifically, bow users can have a really big problem against CL40 users, provided the CL40 user doesn't have the low ground. So if you manage to get a 1v1 with a bow user while you have a CL40, you're probably going to win. Bow users also struggle a lot versus healing items such as healing emitter, H+ infuser, or healing beam. So if you're carrying any of those, it's going to drastically mess up their time to kill. Now, the V9S is definitely what you would consider a sustained weapon on light, because this thing has such a large magazine. And once you're done firing it, it reloads so fast that you can get right back into the action again. This thing really encourages you to get into a little bit more of these drawn out fights. That being said, once again, as a light player, you should always be playing around cover or around your team. You shouldn't just be diving someone solo with the V9S. You're probably going to die, but force them into a sustain, probably around your teammates or where you have cover, or maybe you're playing an off angle. Now, the thing about the V9S is that it does pretty good damage at pretty much every range. Now, like, obviously, it's not going to be as much as the ARN, but it's still pretty good, and the reload is really, really nice. Now, if you need to force those close range engagements, the hip fire of this thing is pretty good up to about like this range right here. So in these close range engagements, you can just kind of be strafing around and going for these hip fire kills, and you're probably going to get them, but just make sure that you weaken them ahead of time. Now, the way to kill the V9S user is to force them into those close range engagements that they might not necessarily want to be in, especially versus something like a double barrel or an SA-12. They're probably going to lose those fights. And if you manage to outpoke them while they're playing around cover, something like the repeater or the pike can usually get the job done. Or even an F-car, if you manage to land those headshots, can do really, really well against them. The V9S is a lot like the 9.3R in that way. You kind of just have to win your duels. It's not an insanely overpowered weapon. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty fair. And there's not really a whole ton of alternate strategies you need to employ. You just kind of need to outgun it. Obviously, forcing pokes and forcing close range engagements with better close range weapons are good, but it's not a very gimmicky weapon. It's really straightforward. Now we've got the double barrel, and this is the definition of a gimmicky weapon. You need to run a very, very particular playstyle if you want to use the double barrel shotgun, and that is a full committal dive playstyle. This gun does like no damage from long range. Obviously, you can kind of kill a light there, but if I want to kill a medium, it's just nothing at all. And you're probably going to die against these players. Even this light player, if I engage him like this, the M11 would have killed me already if he was good at aiming. So you need to get very, very close to every single one of your targets if you want to actually do well with this weapon. And especially against targets like the heavy, that can be very dangerous. So to help you with that, it's a really good idea to take very particular gadgets. I would recommend that you run dash if you are in high elo. You could run cloak and grapple in probably your world tour matches if you're just a world tour player, or quick cash or something like that. But if you are plat or higher, definitely run dash. And then running vanish bomb can be great for engaging and then getting your kill, or using it to escape. And then you have Goo Grenade if you want to block someone off who might be running away or to protect yourself as well. And then you can use Gateway either as an engage or as a disengage once again. So for example, here's what an engage might look like with the Gateway. I toss one up here, put down my Vanish Bomb, get my kill. Now I'm back over here. And then if anyone chases me through the Gateway, I threw goo behind them to block my escape, and I should be good to go. But if you mess that up even slightly, there is a pretty decent chance that you will get killed. This weapon is either you kind of get your kill or you get killed. Now, because this weapon can be a little bit finicky at times, sometimes you might not actually get the one shot on players. Throwing in a quick melee at the very end of it can be a good way to clean it up. So let's say that I'm pushing this heavy and I accidentally fire a shot too early. Throwing in a couple quick melees can do the job, but for every more quick melee that you need to do, the odds of you dying does go up. Which is why I recommend if you're a double barrel player to just take your time with your shots at first. Don't rush your shots and do crazy flicks that you're going to miss and are going to get you killed. Go up to these targets, make sure that you're going to hit both of your shots, get your kill, and then disengage. Make sure that you just take it slow for now, get your shots, make sure that they actually hit, and then you'll eventually get better and faster at it. So to kill a double barrel, you need to do two things. You need to make them miss their shots, and then after they've missed or done little damage with their shots, force them into an engage with you, and they are going to 100% lose. Because every time they fire these two shots, they have this big, long reload period where they're basically useless. So if you get them to waste their ammo like that, they're a really, really easy kill. And then obviously, if you force them into a long-range engagement, there is just absolutely nothing that they can do here until they've closed the distance. So just forcing them into an engage where they miss or don't deal a lot of damage is the easiest way to kill a double barrel. So just be very careful about your positioning, where you're playing, and make sure that it's not an area that a double barrel player would like to play around. Now, kind of like the 9.3R and the V9S, the XP54 is a very straightforward weapon. And the thing about the XP54 is it is super, super versatile. It's good at close range, it's good at medium range, and it's even good at those longer ranges. So if you're choosing the XP, you're choosing to have one of the most versatile guns in the game. But because it's one of those jack-of-all-trades guns, that means that it's not going to be the best weapon at close range, mid range, or long range. It's just pretty good at all of those. Now, I would say that this weapon's optimal engagement range is right about here, kind of this mid-range-ish area. So definitely try and play around this range right about here. Obviously, once again, you can play close range, you can play far range, but right here, this is optimal. Now, the biggest thing with the XP is just making sure that you can control the recoil, because if you don't control the recoil on this gun, and here's what it looks like. It's very much you just want to keep moving your recoil down and then aggressively move it to the left. If you don't control that, you're going to be missing your shots, especially at those mid ranges. So just make sure that you master that recoil, and then you'll be doing great with this thing in no time. To counter this weapon, you just got to either win in a duel against it. It's a pretty fair weapon. It's not particularly overpowered or underpowered. It's just straightforward. Or once again, you can force it into either a long-range engagement with a very specialized long-range weapon, or a close-range engagement with a very specialized close-range weapon, and you'll also probably win as well. Now, sword is a very, very interesting weapon. It's gotten a lot of changes and a lot of nerfs over time. It always seems like this weapon is changing, so in the future, this thing could be buffed, and then everything I tell you in this video could be completely useless, but I will try to cover the basics of swords and the things that probably won't change with it for now. So, obviously, you have your left click, which is an okay amount of damage. Let's go up to a medium right here. Just 1, 2, 3. Then if I'm at this heavy, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. But the thing is, a lot of sword players don't actually use this left click very often. A lot of the times they're going to use the right click instead. And what the right click does is it does a little bit of a lunge. It is the only weapon in the game at the moment that actually gives you movement on an attack. So going for this lunge a lot is going to be one of the best plays to do with a sword. Now, because of that, it's actually a good idea to throw in a quick melee here and there. That way you can one-shot a light. And then for the medium, you can go 1, and then 2, and then throw in a quick melee afterwards. And then against the heavy, you can go 1, 2, 3. But you might be thinking right now that this is a pretty easy way to get killed, and you would be correct with that. So that's why you always run dash with sword. You can use grapple if you're being silly, but dash is basically the correct choice in almost every elo. So if I do the right click attack with the sword and then dash backwards, That way the target is always going to be like looking back and forth constantly to try and look where you're going. And you just want to be constantly doing movement jukes on them until you've killed them, because otherwise you're just a free kill. So it's pretty easy to get the kill on the light, just one in a melee. The medium can be a little bit more tricky. You just got to make sure that you keep dashing around them like that. And then for the heavy, you just want to be making sure you do your lunges and then dashing whenever he looks at you. So do your lunge, dash, lunge, dash, lunge. Now, something that you can do with this is that if you want to do your left clicks, you can kind of mix them in if you manage to strafe behind the target. But I wouldn't just do the left clicks like right in their face like this. That's just asking to get shot. So try to only do the left clicks and stuff if you manage to strafe behind them. And then when they do turn to look at you, just do a little dash again, do a little lunge again, just keep mixing it up like that. Now, in terms of movement with the sword, you can actually throw in a dash after you've done your lunge to get a very long dash. If you do your dash too early, that's what it looks like. But if you do your dash right after the sword lunge like this, you go very, very far. And you can even throw in little jumps and bunny hops behind it to go even further. So you can kind of use the sword as a movement tool as well. But using that with the dash is a really good engage. And just keep doing stuff like that. And then mixing in, obviously, the left clicks, or maybe dash back to get in range. And you should be good. But it's usually a good idea to kind of get slightly behind the target, but not too far like that. As you can see, I went way too far, and then the heavy could easily just turn around and shoot me. So timing it like this, and then doing the lunges and then the dashes afterwards are usually a good idea. Obviously, it's pretty hard to pull off. Even I'm not super great with it. But that's the idea behind it, is that you don't want to go too far with the dashes, but just enough to engage upon them and usually get a little bit behind them. So like that. And then just keep dashing like that. And there you go. In terms of the gadgets that you want to use, you could use a similar loadout to the double barrel, like Vanish Bomb. Then you could throw in your goo grenade and then your gateway, right? But another thing that you can also do, which is what the high elo sword players tend to do a little bit more, is using smoke thermal, which is a smoke grenade. You throw on your thermal, and there you go. And let's go in here in this building and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. So let's imagine that in here, there's a cache out. If I throw 2 smoke grenades like this, and one of my teammates starts capturing the cache out, and any enemy drops down to defend them, they won't be able to see anything, but I can see everything and just keep getting free sword damage on all of them. And because it's a sword, I never have to reload. And you can also throw down explosives into smoke to clear them out if you didn't know. It is a little bit buggy sometimes though, and it doesn't always work, but most of the time it should work. The only issue is that there are 3 smoke grenades in the game, and usually there's only ever 1 or 2 explosives at a time. That's why something like the CL40 is pretty good against this strategy specifically. But other than that, the smoke thermal strategy is pretty effective. Now, in terms of counters against the sword, you can nullify a sword user before they get too close if you need to just back up and disengage. Getting an H+ infuser heal on your teammate to keep them alive while they fight the sword can also be a great idea. Using sonar grenade to make sure that they don't jump you by surprise is also pretty decent. And then, of course, using a dash to just dodge their sword hits is a lot more possible these days because the sword tends to be locked in one direction a little bit more than it used to be. And then, of course, running thermal yourself is good against any smoke thermal sword users. If you're on medium, Cerberus does tend to chew up sword players a little bit. And then CL40 is also pretty good. Running something like Jump Hat to make sure that they can't really attack you is also nice. And then you could also use something like the Glitch Trap to get rid of their dashes, because a lot of sword players rely on their dashes a lot. And then if you're heavy, just run Winch Claw. And if you can winch the sword user, they're usually dead. You could also try and force them up into an anti-grav cube, but that's a little bit more of a niche strategy. And then landmines are also decent as well. I almost forgot to mention it as well, but healing emitter does also mess with their timed kills as well. So running a healing emitter and then forcing them to fight near it can also be a good idea. And finally, we have throwing knives. These are a projectile-based weapon that you never have to reload. You can just keep throwing them forever. But the thing is that they can be a little bit harder to hit because they're projectile, right? You have to really, really lead your target, and then at close range, you can kind of just click. But yeah, at those mid to long ranges, you do have to do a little bit of leading with it. Now, with these weapons, as you can see, the body shot is all right. You know, it's okay. I'll even go up to this heavy. It's all right. So what you really want to be doing with this weapon is getting those headshots, because the headshots deal a lot of damage here. Just to show you, look at that. That's 2 against the heavy. 1, 2, Yeah, it's a lot of damage. And then with the right click, it's kind of the same thing. You can do a lot of damage with the right click, you know, and it's great as a poke weapon, but you want to just aim for the head with this thing as often as possible once again, because this thing does a lot of damage. Pretty much every throwing knife user I see runs dash. That way you can throw your knives, keep dashing around like this, because you never have to reload. You can just force these crazy sustain fights with your enemies, and then you can just keep dashing around because these things never have to reload. This is the definition of sustain. But of course, you can also play this more poke play style with your right click and then dive in for sustain afterwards once you get a little bit of damage. So the play style for this is kind of alternating between poke and sustain back and forth. Now, something that you should probably know is that the right click actually does go a little bit further than the left click, so it has a little bit of a different trajectory. So just keep that in mind when you're using this thing. So if you're trying to go for those long range hits, definitely go for that right click attack rather than the left click one. So then once again, like dashing around, making sure that you actually hit your shots is a good idea. So a lot like the double barrel, just at first take your time just hitting your shots with the throwing knives, and the speed will come in time. Don't do crazy flicks, don't rush it, get used to it, and you will naturally get better with them. Now, to play against throwing knives, a lot of times close range weapons or something like that is going to be really good against them, unless these guys are constantly hitting their headshots, because otherwise, if they're not constantly hitting their headshots, then they are not getting optimal damage with this weapon, and they might as well just be using any other light weapon at that point. So using a bunch of movement on them, forcing them into super close range engagements with shotguns, hitting them with a winch claw, all of those things are really powerful against the throwing knives player. And try not to let them do like this poke damage strat where they just kind of right click you constantly. You gotta dive them at this point, otherwise they're just going to keep doing it and you're going to keep taking massive chunks of damage. If you want to specifically counter the throwing knives, CL40, it's good. Flamethrower can also be good against them as long as they don't get out of your flamethrower range. Winch claw, I've also mentioned, that's a good one. And then you can even use something like Glitch Trap to get rid of their dashes. If they don't have their dash, they're usually pretty free to kill. So yeah, just get rid of their dashes. Use any of those things that you think are good in close range. Use movement, all of that stuff. Those things are what kills throwing knife players. And that was every weapon in the finals. This video has gone on for quite a long time already, so no long outro today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.